Welcome back to the Floyd Memorial Library podcast, where you'll find information on what's going on the North Fork of Long Island. We'll be focusing on issues and opportunities going on in the community, as well as people and stories from the present and the past. I'm your host, Christopher Bianchi, and our guest today is Southold Town board member Jill Doherty, and we talked to her about her time growing up on Long Island and her ancestry, as well as her time getting involved with the Southold Town government and working as a trustee member and eventually a town board member. And we also talked to her about some of the issues that she feels are important to her going on in the town and the future of the town. So I hope you enjoy episode 29 with Southold Town board member Jill Doherty. Thank you very much for coming on the podcast today.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
And so with all the podcasts, I'd like to just start off with, if you could give us a little introduction where you were born and raised.
Sure. I was actually born in Glen Cove Hospital and raised in Port Washington and East Marion. My great-grandfather was ordained in the East Marion Baptist Church in 1902, so a family's been coming out since then, and he subdivided Gardeners Bay Estates, and that's where my family still has property and lives. And my father was a school teacher, so we were out here every weekend, school vacations all summer long. And basically my work life, social life was out here. And right after high school, I decided that this is where I wanted to be. So I've been here ever since full time.
Nice. And in terms of ancestry, how far back can you go in terms of your ancestors? I guess if you wanted to talk about your mother's or father's side in terms of when they might have come over.
Sure. My father's side came over from Ireland, and they actually helped build, I think it was the railroad in the city in Brooklyn and stuff like that. And my grandfather and his younger brother, I think, were born over here, but some of his siblings were born in Ireland. And my father grew up in Rockville Center, and my great-grandfather on his mother's side was the minister. And they've been, like I said, coming out here and everything. So and my cousins have done a lot of the, ancestry. So we go back further than that. But
yes.
Yeah. But I got a cool story with my great uncle, Ed Thorpe. He's the one that designed the football the way it is. And before the Lombardi Trophy, it was the Ed Thorpe Trophy.
Oh, wow.
And in 1969 or 1970, it turned to the Lombardi Trophy. So before that, it was the Ed Thorpe Trophy.
And that was your uncle?
My great-uncle.
Your great-uncle?
Yeah, my grandfather's brother.
Wow.
Yeah. I always like to tell that part of my history. So
yes.
It's fun.
And then, so your father grew up in Rockville?
Rockville Center.
Rockville Center?
County. Yeah.
What about your mom?
My mom grew up in Valley Stream, and I don't really know much about her past from England and Ireland, and my grandparents she had a brother, and I have, cousins from that. She died at the age of 36 from leukemia. Oh. So, and then, my grandmother and grandfather were very much part of our lives. So after that still,
And you said your father was a teacher?
Yeah, he taught in Weber Junior High School. He was a history teacher, American history teacher in the high school. And then when he retired, he moved out here full time with my stepmother, Paula, who, God bless her, she's still a nurse at San Simeon. And my father passed away about 4.5 years ago.
And did you say Glen
Cove Hospital. That was just the hospital
where
that
you were born.
I was born there, and then but we lived in Port Washington, and that's where my father taught.
And how long did you live in Port Washington?
So when I graduated high school, I moved out here, so for 18 years, and then I went to Nassau Community College and commuted out here, and my grandmother was out here full time at that point, so I lived with her. And I worked at Brian's Song Restaurant on the weekends, and
Yes.
yeah. So, and my brother Charlie was out here by then, and then I have a sister Ann, and then I have a half brother Frankie, and Charlie and Frankie are out here full time.
And then just a little bit from when you were at Port Washington in the school system, how was it going to school there?
Yeah, it was interesting because well, the elementary school was great because it was right around the corner, so we got to walk to school and all that. So that was kindergarten through 6th. Junior high school was 7th, 8th, and 9th, and my father was a school teacher there at that school, and he was also like acting principal, so like or vice principal. So if the principal or vice principal was absent, then my father would be that for the day or whatever. And so that was like, and then he would just go stand in the hall and they'd be like, oh, Mr. Thorpe's in the hallway. Everybody would calm down and not run, So it's, but my father, he treated everybody the same, even us. So it was a lesson. I'm really glad that I had that experience because, when a parent teaches you stuff at home and then there's a teacher, it's kind of, you see it differently, but he really treated all the kids like they were his kids, and they treated it all the same. And
there wasn't like he knew you were in the school, but he still would treat everyone similarly.
Yeah, right. And we never had him as a teacher, of course. So he made sure that he was head of the social studies department. So he did the scheduling. So he got to pick what teachers he thought would best fit us, So I'm glad I didn't have him as a teacher. I heard he was tough.
And what did you do for fun as a kid growing up in Port Washington?
Well, I lived right on the first block of Port Washington, right next to the Manhasset Golf Club, golf course. So in the wintertime, we would throw our sleds over the fence and go sleigh riding in the golf course and be out there all day. I mean, I got frostbite when I was little because you just don't go home,
Yeah.
So we did that a lot, but a lot of times we were out here. And in the wintertime, we were friends with everybody that lived here, and there was a lot of exploring to do in the woods and stuff like that. And of course, in the summer, we're on the water the whole time, and everything you can imagine on the water. I'm very fortunate my father was our sailing teacher, so sailboats, motorboats, skiing, and my kids are fortunate to have that as well. I mean, in December, my brother and my son went wakeboarding, and I was watching, so we were out on the water doing that, so
wow.
Yeah, it's kind of fun, yeah.
Yeah.
So.
And then did you know kind of what you wanted to do coming out of high school?
I had no idea, and I kid around today saying I still don't know what I want to do.
Yeah.
I was interested in bookkeeping and accounting, so I went to college for that, and I've been a bookkeeper, and I worked in the banks after I did, and I always do restaurant work, bartending, whatever. That's always the side job. And then somebody said, oh, you should go work for the town. They got good health package and all that. So I started there in 1988. I think I was 26 or 27 when I started there, and I was clerk to the planning board for a few months, and then I moved over to the trustees and was there for like 10 years. And then I just got to know all the people there. It was great working there, and I left after my son was born to raise my 2 kids at home, and that was 5 years, and I did bookkeeping and cleaning houses and babysitting, because you still had to work. So I was fortunate to raise my kids and not have them at babysitters a lot, so it worked out well.
And then, so you said you had your family, at least grandfather, in terms of East Marion, even since the early 1900s, had been coming out here, but you decided you wanted to come out here after. And was that in the 80s?
Yes.
In the 80s?
Yeah.
How would you describe the area at that time? I guess the North Fork, and you said you worked in Greenport?
Yes. Yeah.
How would you describe Greenport in the 80s?
I just told somebody this year, everybody says Tumbleweed Tuesday. I said it was literally a thing, because I would be out here in the winter and you go into Greenport and there was tumbleweeds going down the block because there's like all the stores were closed, or most of the restaurants and stores were closed, and it was desolate. It was nice. It was quiet, and it was just the locals, and we were part of all the locals because we were out here every weekend, and we had our group of friends. And people sometimes say, oh, remember in high school we did this? And I'm like, no, because I didn't go to high school with you. But that's how much involved my siblings and I were with the community back then.
And then since being out here, you mentioned that you got involved with the Southold Town. How did that kind of come about?
I was asked to run for trustee. And my first reaction was no, because I'm not political. I don't want to do this, And then I realized, like, well, who knows the job better than the clerk, So I decided to give it a shot, and I won. And I did a 4-year term, and I ran again, and I won again. And then in the middle of that term, they asked me to run for the empty seat on the town board, and I did that, and I've been on the town board ever since. And it's been a great experience. By working, starting at the bottom and learning what each department did, I think that makes me more effective as a town board member.
And from your time on the trustee to becoming a board member, do you see some of the issues are kind of the same from when you were a trustee to when you're a board member that you're working on right now?
Yeah, a lot of it is the same, and it just evolves with technology and everything else, and sometimes the problems come back around and you have to adjust. And that's why, like, I always, when you try to explain, people, like, they want to get a permit or something, and they're like, well, why can't you just do this? And I'm like, well, nothing's black and white, because each property's different, times are different, things change. We have so many more people out here year round now. That affects the way business is done in every aspect, not just town stuff. So those problems come back around, and you have to adjust, and you have to, change things. So, and it's good to know that, like, all right, it used to be this way, and I know why, because I was there at the time, So then I say, yeah, well, now we have this happening in town, so we need to adjust this, and we need to change this code or that code.
And from your time working, has it been 30 years or more that you've been working for the town?
Yes.
How has it been, especially now, in terms of parties and government, whether it's on the federal or state level, that's kind of been somewhat divided in terms of party lines, but working in the town, how has it been trying to accomplish issues or like trying to be more bipartisan over your time here and I guess currently right now?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to explain, because I keep the national politics out of whatever I do, because it really has very little to do with the daily work that I do on the town. And I've never looked at my job as political. Yes, it's political because I got to run for election and that. But once I'm in the job, it's about doing what needs to get done. And I work well with people, and we could have our differences, but let's talk it out. Let's figure it out together. And I think we have a good working group right now. And it's fun, because it's just, you learn a lot. Even though I've been there forever, I see it, but I still learn a lot, because people have they bring their different, perspectives to the table. And that's how you get things done. So to me, it's not about like, okay, I'm talking to a Democrat across the table, so I'm not going to agree with them because they're a Democrat. Like, I don't think that way. My brain just doesn't think that way.
Yes.
I just try to do I always, from starting at the town and starting at the bottom, I always remember what it's like, and I always try to do the best for I'm there for the town, not, and the people in the town, not for, because I'm political or something like that. That's how I've always looked at it anyway.
And what would you say currently now as being a board member for the town, what do you think are the 3 major issues that you're focusing on now in your position, or you feel that are important for the town?
So the one that I've been working on diligently for the past almost 2 years is the housing. The liaison to the Housing Commission, and under the governor's program that was started, and money's coming in, and the 0.5% that we did the referendum, we have to have a housing plan that Assemblyman Thiel established. And so the governor has money coming in for housing and stuff. So in order for the town to take advantage of all that, we have to have a plan. So we developed the working group based on the statute, and they were amazing local people that volunteered their time and brought their expertise to it. And I think we have an amazing plan. And now it's step 2 is for the town board to do the legislative parts of it and get that up and moving, which we're working on. And, the the main issue we have with the housing is when you say housing, people think Section 8. And I like to use the word attainable housing now instead of affordable housing because, people can make a good salary and work a few jobs and still can't afford to buy a house with the way real estate is. And we want to keep our younger people here and our seniors in their homes if they can. So it's about getting creative. And, this is an issue all over the United States. So.
How do you feel about, you think there needs to be more housing on the North Fork? And in terms of trying to make sure, even like Western Long Island, it's kind of, they grew more just, okay, we'll keep building on the next plot of land, and maybe not have an actual smart plan for how to deal with traffic and stuff in the future.
Right.
But in terms of Norfolk, it has somewhat been able to keep some of its land, and even probably more than the South Fork.
Yeah.
But how can we do kind of a smart development or sustainable development where we can build more housing, but we don't lose the land?
Yeah, the answer is not always just build more. It's let's see what infrastructure we have. Where the other important project that we're working on is the review of our zoning code. And we could rezone areas where you can have a mixed use. 5 years ago, we did change the code where businesses can put an apartment above their store and use it for workforce housing. And we have, through the county, you can get a grant up to $128,000 or $125,000 to build an accessory apartment onto your house or above your current garage that you have. So there's things like that we need to expand and do a better job with, and have that mixed use, where you have a walkable downtown where people live and work, kind of like Greenport, and do that more in our hamlets going west. So, and then, we have property that's in the industrial zones that is empty. Let's change some zoning up and maybe use those structures and make them apartments. So there's a lot of other things to do than just outright build new communities.
Yes, and then some people have said that even like those new housing developments, I guess Vineyard View would be an example, but some people have said that it's kind of isolates people in a way that, they're in this development and this is where they go, where they're not connected with the community. But whereas something like a mixed-use development more within the town that might be more walkable might make them feel more included instead of having to drive into a
Right, yeah.
That
Vineyard View was not under the town's housing plan. That was an independent person that wanted to do affordable. So not to say that we wouldn't have done something there, but our first priority is to try to get it in the hamlets of the town. So it is walkable to the bus station, to the post office, to a grocery store. Because the people, if they can have something like that and take a bus to work and save money on not getting a car, then they can build their worth, And so that's the whole idea of putting them in the hamlets.
Yes.
And then we have things to work out. Once somebody starts doing better for themselves and they make more money, you can't kick them out of where they're living. So then, have different levels. So you have somebody that, is doing fine and is maybe upper middle class with people that are just starting out. So you have that mixed use and community value in there, and people can take care of each other and stuff. So.
And I've talked to other people about the different levels in terms of housing, whereas there might be a cutoff for people that might not, their salary might fit in below a certain amount, but then there's people that can afford to buy their own house and they can afford that, but then there might be people stuck in the middle.
Yeah.
That might be more middle class, that they don't make the cut below, but they still can't really afford to buy a house. And then I know it's kind of a tough thing because people have said that, well, if you wanted to make something more for that, you still would need to possibly get money from the state to try to cover that, but then that would be more money that would cost to try to balance out their payment as someone that's more in that middle income bracket.
Yeah, a lot of these, that's why I say it's attainable housing, because a lot of these places, whether they're for rent or for sale, are really for people who are making, we can do a certain percentage of the median income, and we can do 80%, 100%, 125%. So you're talking about like, a family of two making $150,000 a year is eligible for this. To me, that's a lot of money. But unfortunately, that's not enough to buy a house, for two people. And then if you're buying one of these and you fit into the town criteria, you still have to be mortgageable, and maybe the bank won't give you the loan. The housing plan has so many different programs. You can get down payment assistance for a single house that you buy if you fit under the program. If there's a developer that wants to do a development, get into that. And then once you say you're picked for that, you still have to go through the financing background to see if you're eligible. There's low interest loans, and I mean there's so many different, we're trying to think of every different variety to help all the different people, because it's not for the low income, because they're not going to qualify for a mortgage, they're not going to qualify for all this stuff. This is more for medium and kind of above.
Do you kind of want people to be able to eventually be able to own their own house? Because some of it's where they might just, you rent to own, or you just rent an affordable housing. And then at some point, how does that balance out if they do eventually own it? I mean, it's not just the town, because it's also the state taxes, and people might eventually own it, but then the taxes they pay every year on the houses is a lot.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's no reduction in that. But, a lot of people, some people don't want to own. They're happy renting. And the other idea of renting is so they can spend a little less a month, so they can save for the down payment to go buy a house that they want. And then they move out and they buy their house. But everybody's story is different. And we're trying to do a variety of everything to fit everybody, that they can have this attainable housing and feel they have some ownership in it, even though they rent. It's something permanent and stable, for a while. Like if you have little kids and you're renting, you don't know if that tenant's going to kick you out or not. So this is something a little more stable, I think. And then you have the ownership. We're working on Carroll Avenue, and hopefully that will be ownership, but hopefully that will grow into a nice little community where people have the security and can be there for a long time.
And then what do you think are two other issues that are important?
Well, out here on the North Fork, it's always the environment for me. You have more people, you have more structure, you have more pollution, you're using the aquifer more, you're watering your lawns more. I'm on the liaison on the tree committee. We have a tree code that we're working on that has not been brought to the town board yet. So I'm hoping that we can tackle that. But that's, there's other priority stuff that the supervisor wants to work on first. And that will stop people from clear cutting their property, because it's the balance of nature and living within nature. And so we unfortunately have to make more codes, and I don't like it, but yeah. So the environment with all that, and the coastal resiliency, we put money into the budget for that, and are reviewing our zoning code. The zoning code was done in the 60s, I think, but mostly a lot of it in the 80s. But it just, and we've been piecemealing, changing stuff. So we've hired a consultant that we're overviewing the whole code and seeing what still works, what doesn't. I mean, things like farming have changed, and people have to get more creative on how they sustain their businesses. And you want to keep the mom and pop businesses here, and the farming. And
do you think, because I guess it has gotten tougher for farming in terms of kind of getting by.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
But we don't want those areas to, I mean, it would be nice if they stayed farms, but some of them have, as we've seen, I think in the 80s or 90s with the vineyards have come in, and that's been another form of agriculture. I don't know, some people have said agritainment.
Yeah.
Yeah, just making sure that we don't lose that open space, whether we we do try to keep it as farming, or we end up having to reuse it as something else in the future.
Yeah, I think the key is for the town board to be a little more flexible with the farming land, and so encourage people, the landowners, to sell their development rights to the town so it does stay open space, but they still need to make their money and they still need to survive. So they have to be creative. I mean, a perfect example are the ciders. They grew potatoes and now they have a potato chip factory. So they evolved to figure out, okay, how do we sustain our farm? And I think it's the job of the town to help the farmers do that. And we have to balance that out. We can't hold their hands so tight that they can't evolve. So I think, and we've been struggling that for years, working with our agriculture committee and our land use committee, and trying to come up with some good changes that will help them.
And in terms of the environment, with regards to water quality, is that another important issue, that in terms of making sure the quality of water is good and runoff or algal blooms? And I know someone mentioned something that I think it might be more of a Suffolk County thing, that in terms of the aquifers and getting stuff from the pine barrens, that might not be a sustainable future. And just maybe, I don't know if regulation on water is a good thing in terms of how people with watering lawns and how that is done and what the town might be able to do, and making sure we have enough water down the road.
Yeah, right now the water committee, I'm not a liaison to that, but the water committee is coming up with some regulations for watering lawns, because in the summertime 80% of our water use is for watering lawns. And if more and more people move out here, we won't be able to sustain that. So unfortunately, again, it's time for codes on that. And what the town has tried to do is, and the environmental groups have tried to do, is water education. People can rain barrels. I mean, a lot of the environmental groups have had classes how to build a rain barrel. You can look online how to do that. If everybody just does their little part, then it turns into a big savings for everybody. So when, where we have traditional septic here, and we're putting our septic back right into the groundwater, and, the more structures you build, the less, there is for that to filter itself. And the other thing, I've been liaison to the engineering department, and I've worked with engineering and highway. As a trustee, secretary, and a trustee, I worked on this, is our road ends and our runoff. Now, with Superintendent of Highways and the engineer, they have this great program on upgrading our drainage where they can. There's some low spots where it's below the floodplain, so they can't really do much. And with the sea level rise and everything, there's a lot of flooding that's going on, but they've really fixed a lot. And we have to report to the DEC, and we've gotten off some lists, which is good, because that's our goal, is to get off some of the DEC lists, because if we can close our overflow into the creeks, and our creeks are the cleanest creeks in the East End, and they're still closed because DEC has a program that they have to do water testing, and they don't have the manpower to do it. But we're working towards all that, and we've really come a long way. So that's part of helping save our water too.
And with the roads, you mentioned there's some low-lying areas. Do you see down the line, if there are ways in terms of working with the drainage, but even say in between East Marion and Orient, I could see that area possibly flooding, and there needing to eventually be a overpass, or some areas where it's almost like you need to
raise the road. Yeah. Well, some areas it's doable to raise the road. Other areas we can't, because then we're going to flood out the properties, the houses and everything. And then we're also dealing with the two main arteries. One is state road and one is county road. So we're not in control of those roads as far as the infrastructure and how to build them and what to do with them. That doesn't mean we can't reach out to them and work with them and say, hey, can we fix this area or fix that area? So yeah, it's not an easy task, and we're reviewing all of our roads and our drainage to see where we can, do some raising of the roads.
And in terms of traffic, do you see that more as I feel like some people might say, oh no, it's just a summer issue. Other people might say, well, it's something that needs to be dealt with, whether it's summer issue or not, or whether we do get more people living out here year round. Do you see that as something that needs to be worked on?
Yeah, I mean, traffic is a big issue, and it's a year-round thing now. It's not like when I was younger where it ended on Tumbleweed Tuesday, you know. And and that goes to our roads, the infrastructure. They get beat up more. We have to spend more money on that. And we've talked about on the town board level to reach out to the transit, and if we could, work with the railroad, and you could have, like, say, a section the railroad that splits. So to keep one train constantly going while one does all the stops. And then you can have somebody come from the city, or come, from up the island and just come straight out to Mattatuck and say, instead of taking, all the stops on the way. We have to get creative with that. And we work with Riverhead Town all the time. And, it's not an easy fix. And, unfortunately, the roads that we do have were designed, 100 years ago, and they're not wide. So they don't have, some areas we can make larger shoulders and bike lanes and passing lanes, and some we just can't.
Like you said, with possibly the train, I know Riverhead is trying to do a transit hub there and build up around there. And then that would be something that at least people wouldn't have to go all the way to Ronkonkoma in terms of time schedules, because it's hard to go into the city and back,
right,
or whether people are commuting. But I definitely do see people using it in the summertime to come out here, because it does, for the most part, drop you off, whether in Greenport or Southold or Mattatuck, where people could walk around and stay in a hotel. And then I could see the widening of the roads being somewhat of an issue. And then I've seen, in terms of other towns or cities, they're like, oh, well, we'll widen the road again, but it still doesn't really fix the problem, because you'll just get more people using it, and the traffic in 10 or 20 years will be back to what it is. So having some other forms of transit, whether it's the bus or the train, or thinking kind of outside of the box with other forms of transit.
Yeah, I mean, it's a whole global thing. You have to, it's not just the trains, it's not just widening the roads. It's getting the bus and the transit, and the people who don't drive, that rely on the bus system to get to work up the island or whatever. The county has to do a better job on that, because they run late a lot. So yeah, I don't know the answer to that, because it's hard, because we're so far out here, and it's amazing, as much as people have found the North Fork. I've, in my travels, they're like, oh, where are you from? I'm like, I'm from Long Island. I don't say I'm from New York. I say I'm from Long Island. Oh, I've been to Massapequa. I'm like, yeah, that's good. I'm 2 hours after that. It's like, so they really don't know out here. So unfortunately, you don't get the state funds. We have to yell and scream in our legislatures, that our East End, legislatures have to yell and scream, like, hey, what about the North Fork? What about the South Fork? To get those funds. It's just like the governor's housing plan. It wouldn't work for out here, because we have septic systems, and we can't build. We don't have the space to build what she, projected for each area to build. And that's an example of, we're so different than any other part. I mean, New York is so unique with all the different.
Yeah, and you can't just put one whole housing plan for the whole state and say, oh, that will fit there. It's like it has to be catered or designed differently for each region.
Absolutely.
Or
yeah.
And do you also think preservation is important in terms of architectural and buildings, and making sure we don't knock down old historic landmarks and build something that's doesn't quite fit in, sticks out, or might look more generic to the rest of the country with some of the new building material, because construction has gone up I think a lot of developers have had to use material that you see in a lot of other places, whether it's different panels or mixing brick with some plastic
Yeah.
shingle. So kind of making sure we can still preserve some of that architecture for the North Fork.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's important that we continue to preserve. We've preserved over 10,000 acres in our history of the program, and we need to continue to preserve because it's just the view shed coming out here and the character. It adds to the character of the neighborhood. I mean, how many kids grew up with a farm in their backyard? Because they lived on the edge of a farm. I mean, nobody does. Like in New York, this is the only place really. I mean, yeah, you have upstate where there's expansive fields and stuff, but it's a little different. And I personally don't want to see these modern buildings being put up, and there's a couple of modern houses around town, and we can't stop that because that's people's private property, and they have the right to build the style they want. But as far as commercial buildings, and we do have an architectural review board that goes over that to make sure that it fits the character of the neighborhood that it's in, so you don't have such a contrast. We have a height restriction on all buildings in town, so we're not going to look like Riverhead, where all the apartment buildings and everything else, and I think that's very important.
What's the limit height?
35 feet from, yeah. That's kind of, some people, when they're on the water, they're like, wow, that's more than 35 feet. Well, it's 35 feet from the ground floor. And if the flood maps tell you have to start at a height of say 20 feet, then that's where your ground floor is. So then you're going to be higher, 35 feet in the air, but the building itself is not going to be higher than 35 feet. So it's kind of, people complain like that's higher, and it's, well, no, it's not. So it's just, nothing's ever easy. It's always a little difficult, but we have that height restriction, and I think that really keeps the character of the whole community, of the whole town. So we don't turn into Riverhead.
And then now, looking back from when you moved here to living here now, what do you enjoy most about living and working on the North Fork?
Of course, I liked it better back then. Everybody always likes it better back then. But
is there anything in particular that you miss that you don't see as much now, or I don't know? It's kind of hard to. It's
kind of hard because a lot of it is, because we still have I'm a nature person. I go outside. I do, I walk a lot, and there's still so many trails that we can walk in. Growing up, ice skating on the fresh ponds and stuff like that. Of course, Mother Nature doesn't let us do that lately, but and it just, I think the community, with all the local fire departments and the community groups that do these local things like the Winterfest last week, and of course the Washington's Day Parade. All my life I've been going to that. I think that is what keeps this community what it is, and knowing that the people that, seeing the people that I've known all my life that are still here. And I try to teach the new people the history to appreciate why something's like that, because they come and they're like, why is this old building so low? Well, because that's a historic building, and this is the history of it, and so.
Yeah.
And then they appreciate it more and they understand.
And then for the future, what do you hope for the future of, I guess, Southold Township and the community down the line?
I hope that any future town boards and legislatures can keep the community character that we have. It's hard because we've become such a destination, and when people go away, they want the high-tech stuff. They want all the high-end stuff, but that's not what we are, and I hope it never goes that way, like modern tall hotels or something like that. I don't want to see that. I want to see quaint. And Long Island's the last farming community. People come out here to see that because they're from the city and they didn't grow up that way or whatever, and it's a vacation spot for them, but it's also a place where we live and raise our kids and grow up, and we have the mom and pop stores, and we have the farming, and I want to see it stay like that. People don't understand why McDonald's doesn't have a drive up And I remember back when they were discussing that, that's the start of the box stores. I mean, the only box store we have now is CVS, and that was a big deal. I wasn't on the board then, but that was a big deal for them to get that approval. Because once you start, the drive up, people still don't understand that. It's like if you come through the drive up and it's just going to expand traffic on the road and it just is the first step into the the city life, kind of like first step into getting to Riverhead type, and Riverhead's great, don't get me wrong. I don't mean to keep bashing Riverhead, but it's, and we need that because we all go to Riverhead all the time to do our shopping and do things and stuff like that, and Riverhead is great, but we just don't want that out here, and I hope it stays the way we have it here.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
And was there anything else you'd like to discuss that we haven't covered?
I don't know. We've covered a lot, but I'm always available to people if they have questions to navigate how government works. I've been there a long time, and that's part of the favorite part of my job is the constituent services and to help people navigate through their issues, because if you don't go to town hall on a daily basis, you don't know. And you don't know how to get through an issue. And sometimes when you have a picture in your head of end result you want and the law doesn't allow, I can help you say, well, what did you think about this way? I didn't know I can do that. And so that's what I enjoy about what I do, and making sure that we minimize code. I mean, I've talked about codes that we're building, but sometimes you just have to build a code like a tree code. We're at that point. I mean, we've been stalling that for years, and we're at that point where people just come out and
they bring their other ideas and then we have to, or the town has to decide how to deal with this, because we hadn't dealt with an issue like this before.
Right.
So
right. I mean, and with the tree code, it could change the character of a neighborhood. It could big a negative effect on our water, on our and our air and our pollution.
Yes. So I just want to thank you so much for coming on today and telling your story, and thank you for your involvement and service in the community and working on important issues for the North Fork.
Well, thank you for inviting me, and thank you for it's about communication and people getting to know what the government does. It's important that they get involved, and we have plenty of committees that if people are interested in certain things, they can look up on our website and see what committee they want to get involved in. And of course, it's volunteer. So, but we're looking for people to join and help us out. So, because it takes a community. We're not just 6 people making a code. We want the community involved in our decision making.
Definitely.
So, thank you.
Thank you. Well, I hope you enjoyed episode 29 with Southold Town board member Jill Doherty. I want to thank you for listening to the Floyd Memorial Library podcast, and we'll see you next time.